everybody, I'm Phil Dejean for the interactive Dare2Draw at M&N. Tonight's format will be 3 parts. A chat with our amazing mentoring artist, then we'll warm up by drawing from our live dynamic model. To get you loose for tonight's Quick Draw Challenge, our special mentoring guest artist you may recognize, award-winning graphic novels from his 23 years on Mad Magazine's Spy vs. Spy, Peter Kuper. He'll be here to chat with us and judge our quick draw contest. But right now, I'd like to introduce Zeea Adams, our co-host this evening, illustrator and comic book colorist.
Hi, everybody. I am so glad to be helping out here on Dare2Draw tonight. I can't wait to see what you guys bring up for us.
Right on.
All right.
You may know Peter Kuper's work from magazines like The New Yorker, The Nation, and Mad Magazine, where he has written and illustrated Spy vs. Spy every issue since 1997. He's the co-founder of political comics magazine World War III Illustrated, now in its 40th year of publication. He has produced over 24 books, including Sticks and Stones, The System, and 2016 Eisner Award winner Ruins, also the winner of the 2018 Reuben Award for Kafkaesque. Currently, he has completed a comic adaptation of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. So let's give it up for illustrator and educator and artist, world traveler, Peter Kuper. Hey, come on, have a seat. All right, let me get this straight. So you just finished Kafkaesque. You did all these kind of ones on Kafka, and then you turn around and then you do Heart of Darkness? What's up with that? Hold it. I'm trying to think. All these depressive things, is it a reflection of your mindset or the current times that we're in or the downfall of human civilization as we know it? What's up with that?
That's correct. You've pretty much nailed it right there. That's all of the above.
Oh, that's going to be it. They're telling me this is going to be an easy interview here. Then.
Yeah, you're answering the questions as you go. So.
Okay. Well, I've got questions for you. So.
No, I'm clearly drawn to the darkness, obviously with Kafka. Although I was drawn to Kafka first for the humor. Oddly enough.
Oh, yes, I know him for his humorous stuff.
It probably says something about my sense of humor. I think I grew up in the Vietnam era with the news on TV, and it would be like we'd be watching the nightly news, Walter Cronkite, and there'd be some explosion, somebody being shot, and then somebody'd say, "Pass the potatoes." And Mad Magazine was in my life as well, and so that collision between, well, just trying to digest food and reading Mad Magazine and that environment, which I wasn't born political, but my parents were fairly conscious people. My father was a professor, and they had me marching against the Vietnam War very early on, and so some of that kind of just got into my DNA. But the humor is a big factor for me. I think it's really important to find humor in these situations, and currently that's what I'm trying to do all the time. And it's difficult, but it's like that's part of the job.
All right, let's see. As a founding father of World War III Illustrated, what is your opinion, as I was saying before, politics in art in America these days? Is graphic novels and sequential art, is this truly the last bastion of free speech?
Well, there's more bastions of free speech, but it's narrowing for sure. I think it's comics. I'm just a super long-term fan of the form, and I think as an art form, it can do just about anything, and it's a means for people to learn about a lot of things in ways that it's a unique way to express these ideas, and there's so many new people coming into the field who are bringing more women, more people of color. There's a broader range of ideas and information coming into the forum, and then people have had the chance to grow up reading comics that weren't just superheroes, so that there's a lot of new material that is being explored there, and it's pretty vast. I mean, comics are still, in a certain way, in their infancy for all the exploration that you can do with form. I pretty much, every time I do a new book, I'm finding new things about the form and new ways to draw and express these ideas, including doing them without any words at all. Like Spy vs. Spy is an example of that, but that's the idea of using image as language that I could communicate with somebody across the world through comics and not have to use any words and have no language barriers is another aspect of that form that is really special.
Right on. Now you're an educator, right? I see SVA, School of Visual Arts, Parsons, my alma mater, and Harvard, right?
Strange, yeah.
Harvard, they have like a graphic novel sort of thing going on there? What's up with that?
They didn't, and what happened was that more and more students were, and a couple in particular, were asking to do their dissertations in, or their thesis in comics. And there was a developing need for this, and I'm not exactly sure how my name got in the hat, but it did, and it landed at a good time where the commute from New York City up to Boston to teach was like, yes, I can do this now. And it's been a brilliant experience. I mean, the students there, of course, pretty uniquely hardworking, but although, School of Visual Arts has plenty of great students as well. But the thing about the Harvard students is a lot of them are coming from different disciplines. So I might have an economist student or somebody who's in literature, and they irritatingly bring so much quality to the comics that they're doing, even though that in many cases they're amateur artists, and yet they still, in exploring it, bring something really quite remarkable to it. But it also, having taught now for 30 years, I find that the story is the thing. You have to have, having a really good idea, and the way you tell the story, I mean, your artistic abilities and having all the chops down to do flashy art is way less important than having a good story.
Right, so it's not necessarily about the flashy stuff, it's about the skills to do
good,
this thing.
Stick figures will do it if the story's brilliant. You can tell, and I have fewer stick figure drawers, but I do have had people who are really, really basic drawing that come in with a great story, and it can work better than something that has lavish art but has a thin idea.
Right on. Now, as this educator, what do you see for the state of education in the Americas and the world? Any different thing that you see a trend going towards? What do you see?
There's a small question.
Yeah.
Trends of education in America and the world. I see the hybrid, I'm always talking about the idea of people having hybrid careers. It's like taking something over here that you know and something over here that you know and maybe something in the middle, and you put them all together, and then you end up having something unique that then is what you can do for a career. And I have the most absurd career, like, just anybody who's gotten into cartooning, but being interested in comics, being interested in cartooning, I'm sure my parents were like, oh goody, here's a guaranteed, easy road. And in fact, one of the things I say to students a lot is that you really have to get comfortable with failure, and the people that are going to survive survive in the field are going to be the ones that when they hit failure, they go, okay. Right. And then you wake up the next day. I mean, my failure muscles are I'm like Popeye, because I'm pitching to the New Yorker pretty much 5 days a week, or some other place. I'm having burning desire to draw about politics these days, and a venue like the New Yorker, they have a daily online spot, and it's a crazy setup where I wake up in the morning at about 7:30. I read the newspaper. I look at my news feed. It's a fairly horrible way to start your day, but I'm kind of obsessed with this. And then by 9 o'clock, I have to have gotten an idea and drawn it up quickly, and then I usually photograph it with my phone, send it in by 9 a.m., and at 9:30, they either say yes, or most likely I hear nothing. That warm feeling that one gets when you've worked at that high speed with a deadline, and sure, I'm certain my idea is really spot on, and then nothing happens, and I have to then go, okay. And in some cases, I go to work and I finish the drawing up because I just this is worth getting out in some way, shape, or form, and I'll pitch it to the other two places I can find. It's very slim pickings, but the fact is, I depend on pixie dust for survival, and I have actually found different routes in with getting the work out there, and with the internet and things like that. At bare minimum, I might just post the cartoon, and sometimes somebody will, if nothing else, I'm connecting the dots with people, and I feel like we're in a time period more than ever where we really have to make sure we connect with each other. And you can disagree with what I'm putting out there, but it's the general sense of that people seeing work that expresses something that they may be feeling or wondering about. And especially in these fake news days, I'm thinking that art more and more is a clarifying way to understand the world. Which I avoided your question almost completely, I think.
It's okay. It's okay. Obfuscation is not a thing. All right. So now I want to take it to talk about one of your books up here. In your book, the Mexico Diario de Oaxaca.
Yeah.
Right. You talk about the Mexican teacher strike. You know, the private markets were taking control. They fired over 500 teachers instead of giving them funding and the resources they need. And even some demonstrators were killed.
Yeah.
So that's like some serious stuff there.
Like 23 people got killed.
And I was thinking it really puts into perspective like stuff that's going now in America. In Chicago, the 11-day teacher strike. Now note, I'm an art teacher, so this is why it's really important for me.
Sure.
Like there's an 11-day teacher strike in Chicago, and they were finally getting justice on things like overcrowding and wages. But like, what did you see going on over there? I'm just curious.
Well, it was, just to roll it back so people understand the context, in 2006, my wife and I decided that we wanted our daughter, who was 9 at the time, to get a different cultural experience. Many years of George Bush as president, George W. Bush, and George Bush too, I was looking for a sabbatical, and we knew that we thought Spanish would be a good language for her to learn, and before 11, kids are able to learn languages really quickly. When I was 10, my father, who was a teacher, had a sabbatical, and we lived in Israel for a year. And I learned Hebrew, which is unfortunately a deeply useless language for all intents and purposes, like walking around. Spanish, on the other hand, extremely useful. But the experience of being abroad and the way it rattled my whole, or opened my worldview, I should say, and rattled it too. But it gave me a sense of, oh right, there's a planet, and it's not just the United States, and that we wanted all of that for our daughter. So we were looking at Spanish-speaking places, and we looked at Spain and thought, well, we're going to be struggling along with the European. The dollar was weak against the euro, dollar strong in Mexico, and we pretty randomly picked this town called Oaxaca. Had visited there a couple of times and was like, boy, it's a beautiful town, and did not do our homework at all as far as what was going on there. I just remember it being a quaint little town. Well, it turned out there was this teacher strike that was an annual event, and this is the 25th year of this teacher strike. But this particular year, there had been a new governor who came in, who everybody agreed, I think, including him, had stolen the election, which I related to heavily with George Bush as president. And he, instead of giving the teachers the normal pay raise, and then they do this, it's kind of like an understanding. They take over the town square. They're there for a week or two, they get their pay raise, they go home. This year, the governor just decided, you know what, I'm going to just send in the police and force them out. And they, instead of being pushed out, hunkered down, and then all across Oaxaca, or the state of Oaxaca, people flowed into the city to back them up. And so this little small strike that could have been 2 weeks, turned into a 7-month strike. And in about the 6th month, a North American journalist, a guy named Brad Will, who ironically had written for World War III Illustrated, this magazine that I co-founded. And he was a freelance journalist, and he was down there, and he was filming police attacking a barricade, and he rather crazily went running towards the action with his camera, and he filmed himself being shot. And he died, and it's all on film, and unfortunately YouTubeable, I guess. So now probably 20 people had been killed up to that point who were Mexican, but when a North American got killed, then suddenly it was an international event. So then federal troops came in, and you had this, the strike blew up, and the town became, it was like a movie set of a dystopic future where you got, or the dystopic past, say, Germany 1933. And you get frisked going into the town square, and there was riot cops everywhere and tanks in the town square. And I pretty much, I went down there thinking I was going to get a break, and I wanted a break from politics, and I just wanted to draw beautiful things and colorful things. And it would crazily, once I started drawing what was going on there, I realized I'm not it's not that I don't want to draw politics. I just was tired of the politics I was drawing. And so this gave me the opportunity to draw something kind of from the ground up where I was finding out about it. I didn't speak much Spanish at the time. And so actually drawing was a way I could communicate with people. And I found it was very interesting. At one point I was standing on a corner drawing strikers who were encamped. They were encamped all over town. And of course, they were immediately suspicious, like, what's this guy like writing down about us? Because they were being attacked by the government. And then some kids came over and were checking out what I was doing, and then they came, and then a parent kind of came over, one of the teachers, and they checked, and then eventually they were giving me a chair, and I was drawing for hours. They gave me water. I could barely, say anything, but I could show them my drawing, and then they're like, hee, that's me, And then I did this drawing, and it was like all hugs and wonderful. And I walked up the street, and there was another barricade with more teachers, and I took a photo, and they surrounded me and wanted the camera and were angry as could be. And I was like, no, but wait, see, I'm on your. And I realized, like, I know I'm not going to pull my sketchbook out because they were angry enough that I thought they'll just grab my sketchbook, and I won't explain that really I'm just a cartoonist who's drawing these things. But I got a sense of time and the involvement that you get through a drawing that way that's quite different from photography in terms of having an interaction where I did have this interaction with them. I put in, they're spending weeks living on the street. So for me to throw in 4 hours, it's like nothing, but it's something. And for me to go snap and walk on was a little, it was a little, and I appreciated that idea a bit. So there was one, and it was, again, it was like a way of using art as language where I was able to communicate with people when I didn't have the Spanish.
All right. Now, as I said earlier, you're world traveled, right? So how does America treat comic artists or illustrators in comparison to Mexico, South America, Africa, Southeast Asia? What did you notice? Were there dangerous times?
Well, I have this strange luck of everywhere I go seems to have a terrible political event just after I leave. So I've managed to just sidestep a lot of things. I went to Rwanda, and then a few years later there was the civil war there, that's horrific, and I was right in there. One of the amazing things about traveling is that it takes places that are otherwise just these names that you read in the paper that mean nothing to you, and then suddenly they have this incredible consequence. And I feel like when I hear something like that, I have a visual and a sense of the people and much greater connection with these places. And drawing in my sketchbook brought me even closer because there's this quality of observing, where when you draw, you're really looking at the details. And I saw things about places that I think I managed to, something that again, photography wouldn't do the same for me, that I saw details that at the time I would spend drawing help create that understanding. But people across the world are incredibly friendly. Everywhere I've gone, the drawing is a super bonus, of course, but just in general, like even as a North American, going to places where I feel like, oh, you probably hate us for, let's say in Mexico, for that matter, current events. Yeah. I sort of walk in apologizing, but I never have gotten that sense of like, oh, even though, in fact, in a certain way, if you want to think about the power of the individual, if I meet somebody in another country, let's say I met an Australian while I was in Bali, and they're loud and obnoxious, I walk away with a sense of Australians are fill in the blank. It's the way, so we're really like all diplomats for our countries, whether we mean to be or not. So, and it's not like you want to, must be on best behavior, it's just the way you are. But I found overall, generally, that people in countries, they don't take you at, the face value of your president, say. Thank goodness, yes. So, so that, they're curious and they want to know. Do you agree with that absolutely hinky, ridiculous, idea? And, I have the good fortune of I can pull out of my back pocket my latest political cartoon and go, as you can see, I disagree. Right.
So comics can save the world. I mean, I don't know.
Well, they can create communication lines, that's for sure, that can express things that then people may understand more about a culture that they didn't otherwise, some people will think that we all walk around with, 10-gallon hats and, cowboy boots or whatever. The perspectives are quite remarkable, but that you can disabuse people of that very quickly.
Thanks so much, Peter. Now, let's throw it over to Zeea, who has some questions from the audience.
Hey guys, so does anybody have any questions for Peter? Please raise your hand. All right, we're gonna run right over to you. What is your question?
How did you think of the spy guys? The
Spy versus Spy?
yeah.
Well, so I was 3 in 1961, so that's why it's wordless, because I crawled out of the womb and did that. I'm lying completely. Spy vs. Spy was created by Antonio Prohias, a Cuban artist who fled Cuba from Castro. He was a political cartoonist himself and was getting death threats for doing political cartoons about Castro. And he came to MAD offices with this idea and presented it to them. He spoke no English, and they passed on it, and he left the office, and then they were like, on second thought, let's give it a try. And because he didn't speak English, then it being wordless was perfect for him. And he just nailed something with those characters and all that. I grew up reading MAD, so that it was like very much in my DNA, and more than I realized. In 1996, Antonio Prohias had retired, and they asked me if I wanted to try out for it. They were asking a number of people to try out. I almost said no right on the spot because I had just finished a graphic novel called The System, which was wordless. I was doing my own thing. I was doing stencils and spray paint illustrations. I felt like I really don't need to do somebody else's characters. I'm on my own groove here, but okay, I'll just give it a shot, So I did this sample, and I did it in stencils and spray paint, figuring this will, guarantee they're going to look at that and go, okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kuper, and send me on my merry way. And it turned out that they were looking for somebody to change it up and yet kind of hang on to the characters are so iconic. It was really easy for me to stay within certain things, but the spray paint, which is literally I cut stencils and use cans of spray paint like Krylon, totally toxic, which is why I've stopped using it after 25 years. That if I really wanted the job, I'm sure I wouldn't have gotten it because I would have slavishly tried to draw like Prohias. But like I said, as soon as I sat down with it, I was like, I know this very well. This is probably one of the reasons I do wordless comics so much. And so there was a lot of reasons that it all was a good fit. I thought I would do it for a year or two, and I'm in my 23rd year, so.
Does anybody have one more question? One more question. Yeah, raise your hand. Yeah, there's a hand.
Hey.
Hi. How did you come up with the idea to do an adaptation of Heart of Darkness? Did somebody approach you, or was that your idea to do that?
You heard the question, right?
Yeah.
So what happened was I was working on a collection of Kafka short stories, adapting Kafka, and I had finished a graphic novel called Ruins that's a 328-page fictional story about a couple moving to Mexico, and I worked on it for 3 years and thought about it for 5 years.
Eisner winner, just saying.
Yes, that was a good thing, which led to me getting an agent. And I was like, the next book I want to do is this Kafka short stories. I was already working on that when I got the agent, but I didn't have a set publisher, and she took that to W.W. Norton, who ended up publishing it. But they said, look, we'll publish this book, but would you like to do Heart of Darkness? And I was like, well, let's see. Okay, that would be a great follow-up. And having done all these adaptations of Kafka, I was really in a groove where adapting was, like those muscles were well worn, and I knew about approaching it. I did actually move to Mexico for 4 months at the beginning of the process because I felt like if I'm sitting in New York in January, which is when I started the book and I just finished Kafka, I'm going to be in this cold, totally non-Heart of Darkness environment, which is essentially the Congo. And I wasn't in a situation where I was going to be able to go to the Congo and work, but I knew I could go back to Mexico because I was familiar with that environment. And it was hot, and I got the flu for about a month right away. I got some kind of insect infestation where I was like scratching for 2 months. And I got stung by a wasp while I was sitting outside. There's barking dogs, smoke coming over the fence, smell of menudo in the air, and I was like, perfect. There's a lot to be said for getting yourself in the right mood when you want to do something. So the kind of comics I wanted to draw, actually, I moved to New York in the late 70s, and the environment here was perfect for like the taxi driver kind of mood of like, wow, gritty and like it fit with my psychology. And there's the impact that, and I recommend this to you even just drawing, even if you're doing single drawings, sometimes the music that you put on can have some impact. When I was working on Heart of Darkness, I Googled sounds of the jungle, and I had that on for like 2 hours while I was drawing a scene, and it was extremely helpful to hear howler monkeys and macaws cawing in the distance, and just this general insect sound that gets into the quality of the work. So these things, there's more than just lines on paper.
Thanks so much, Peter. Hopefully you'll be sticking around for our next exciting segment.
Okay.
All right, everybody.
Thank you.
So next up, it'll be our artistic warm-up